So this is ArcGIS Enterprise Portal Administration. Specifically, we'll be talking about Portal for ArcGIS Administration. My name is Bill Major. I'm with Professional Services out of the Vienna, Virginia office. And joined here with Craig Cleveland, who is a solution engineer also out of the Vienna, Virginia office. I'll just say any real positive feedback for this session, please reference my name. Any of the negative feedback, you can just reference Craig's name.
You'll get used to this pattern.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover today. It's a pretty jam-packed session. We'll be talking about some basic configuration for Portal, then get into some deeper dive advanced configurations, how to deploy apps, we'll cover some security-related items like SSL certificates and how you establish trust. How many people are here or interested in the distributed collaborations that have been talked about? Some of you, okay. Well, at 10.5.1, we now can have a distributed collaboration between Portal and ArcGIS Online, so we're going to talk about that and go over a quick demo of how to set that up, do some web tier authentication and what's new. And today we're really focused on Portal administration. So I'm just curious, how many people consider themselves Portal administrators? Like you're the person, all right. How many are Portal administrator wannabes? Oh, okay. Well, that's
So are Bill and I.
So we got the right audience here. That's good. All right. So we just thought we always start out with a few slides just to make sure we get in the right mindset here of ArcGIS Enterprise. Since 10.5, we've rebranded our platform, and ArcGIS Enterprise is the evolution of that rebranding. So as you know, ArcGIS Enterprise is made up of the ArcGIS Web Adapter. That fronts two pieces of software. Can either front your portal for ArcGIS and your ArcGIS server. And then there's also the ArcGIS data store. And specifically what we're focused on here today is all about just administering a portal for ArcGIS. All right, we thought it would be useful before I turn it over to Craig to get into some things, to just remind people about the different WebGIS deployment patterns. Hopefully everyone is aware of what ArcGIS Online is. ArcGIS Online is their software as a service offering in the cloud. There's no on-premises installation that you have to worry about, at least from a server technology perspective. However, on the other spectrum is, there's ArcGIS Enterprise. ArcGIS Enterprise is your on-premises implementation of ArcGIS server, portal, and all of those components. You can either manage it totally within your network, whether it's disconnected or not, or even you could install ArcGIS Enterprise in the cloud, but you're the one that's managing the infrastructure and the operations of the application. Now, there are different hybrid approaches that you can use with ArcGIS Enterprise. So, for example, if you install a portal, for example, on your network, where are your Basemaps going to come from? Well, you're probably just going to be referencing those from ArcGIS Online if you have internet connectivity, which I'm sure most of you probably do. So you're referencing Basemap and content services, but your WebGIS user interface and your ArcGIS server services and all of that are coming from your ArcGIS Enterprise deployments. And there's also, some people take it a little bit further where instead of just using, let's say, the free services from ArcGIS Online of Basemaps and some content services, you also have ArcGIS Enterprise a little more integrated with Online, where you're also taking advantage of batch geocoding services or geo-enrichment services or a number of analysis tools that you access through your portal, but it's actually proxying those requests out and using it from ArcGIS Online. And in these instances, potentially using credits. Okay, so the idea here is there are different deployment patterns. These different deployment patterns may affect some of your decisions on some of the things we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to now turn it over to Craig, who's going to jump into some basic configurations and get started on that. Admin deep dive.
All right, cool. Thanks, Bill. All right, so basic configurations, and really, as Bill said, depending on your deployment pattern, these things will change a little bit. So that's the key consideration here as we start to talk about that basic config. Some of the things I like to talk, for those of you who haven't been doing a whole lot of portal administration yet, are really just getting your portal ready for use after you've run the installer. After you've done that initial installation, you now got to make your portal a destination, right? You want to make it a place where people want to come to. You need to bring some things there to brand it, to make it more aesthetically pleasing, and you want to populate it with relevant content, things that are meaningful to your users. So all that basic configuration can happen right through the portal UI, and listed here on these slides are some of those things. So, a logo, a name, a description, homepage, a banner, and then featured content. So those things that lay across the front of your portal that are relevant to your users and those workflows, making them easy to discover. And then as we get into some of the other considerations, what are the default base maps in your gallery there? Are those coming from ArcGIS Online? Are they base maps that you create? Are they vector or are they raster? And then configuring utility services, servers, security. Those are things that we'll consider more in some of the more challenging environments. And we'll look at all these here in a demo in just a moment. So out of curiosity, how many of you here in the room are running in disconnected environments today? So like no internet. All right, that's cool. So a little bit more than yesterday, Bill, I guess. So there's, if you're running disconnected, ArcGIS Enterprise fully supports that. So if you have no internet connectivity, you definitely have some more challenges, right? Unique challenges that you need to consider. So some of those things that we take for granted, being delivered from ArcGIS Online are base maps, world geocoding services for that, and other core utility services like printing, geometry, geo-enrichment. All those things are additional considerations that you need to take into account once you've installed your portal and begin to configure it for use. Obviously, without those things, your portal isn't really ready to go and is not going to be nearly as useful to your users. All right, so base maps. Thinking about base maps, if you're in a hybrid environment, this is usually pretty simple. You can take the default configuration, grab your base maps from ArcGIS Online. If you're in a disconnected environment, you've got a little bit more to think about. You can utilize the data appliance product that will deliver those ArcGIS Online base map capabilities behind your firewall. But you can also consider creating your own custom base maps. So if you have your own data and you want to cache that off or create vector tiles from that, you can utilize those that are there. There's the steps there for enabling those custom base maps. I'll just leave that there. You can always see these slides later on. We're not going to show that today in the interest of time, but it's a very simple process if you want to add your own custom base maps to your portal. Now, some of the things to consider from a utility service perspective. Again, when we're operating in hybrid environments, we take this for granted a little bit. But even if we are operating in those environments, you may want to utilize some of your own services. So, for instance, printing. If you wanted to have custom layouts that have your own organization's logos or different sizes and things like that, you might want to deliver your own print service to configure through your portal. From a geocoding perspective, for those of you in the offline environments thinking about getting the world geocoding on premises, you could do that. But also some things that to think about depending on what your organization does is if you have your own unique geocoding services. With the customers that Bill and I deal a lot with, things like MGRS is important, so wiring that into our portal. But maybe if you're a utility and you have a unique ID for assets and you want to be able to search by that within your portal, you can wire that in and make that configuration as well. All right, so all these utility services going beyond their routing, hydrology, elevation, network are all things you need to think about configuring for your portal if you want to have it fully capable for your environment. So as we talk about some of these basic configurations, some new things that are there with 10.5 and 10.5.1, and to be completely candid, this first part is actually from 10.4.1, I believe, but I always like to talk about it for those in the hybrid environment, and that is the ability to configure your portal to use ArcGIS Online resources. So if you're in a hybrid environment and you want to be able to reach out to ArcGIS Online to get elevation, geocoding services, geo-enrichment, it's a very easy few checkboxes. You provide it some credentials, and now you can reach out to ArcGIS Online for those resources. The Living Atlas, hopefully you all heard about this, certainly through the plenary and throughout the week. This is a set of Esri curated content that comes from both Esri and is user contributed. And you now have the ability to configure your portal for this. So your portal will come pre-populated with these Living Atlas items, and then you can choose to enable or disable that, depending on your environment. Distributed collaborations, just going to touch on that because Bill and I have a whole section here, but this is the notion of if you have two portals or even Portal and ArcGIS Online now at 10.5.1, you can utilize these distributed collaborations to share content between those portals. So content can be moved back and forth there. And then the last thing here is the notion of having raster analytics or geoanalytics servers to take advantage of those capabilities that are there in the portal now at 10.5.1 and beyond. All right, so that being said, let's take a look at some of these things. Let's do a quick demo and talk about this basic configuration and see what happens here. So what I have for today's demonstration is a pretty vanilla portal here. So this is totally out of the box, just next, finish. And now we want to make this a bit more of a destination and talk about how do we implement some of those things we saw in those slides. So the home page here, not very aesthetically pleasing, but we can easily enhance that and make it a bit more powerful and a bit more of a destination. So the first thing I like to point out here in the general that I will often do is give it a title here. So by default, we have the ArcGIS Enterprise. So, we might give this the name of our organization. So we'll call this UC Portal 2017. And then give it a thumbnail here. So this is often like an agency logo or something like that. And I have a little Esri logo that we can put in there. I also like to put on the home page of my portal some links to other resources. So if users are coming to the portal for the first time, maybe they're little videos or how-tos, and we can handle that through just a little bit of HTML. And I actually have that here in a file. So this is just a little HTML snippet that we're going to add to our home page here. And we'll go ahead and save this. And you'll see immediately there my logo is now in here. We have a name for our portal. And if we come to the home page, I've already started to add some items down here. So again, just in this little snippet, I have the ability for users to hop off and get to the ArcGIS blog, or they can hop off and get to a tool here that we utilize a lot called the ArcGIS Online Assistant. So that's the first couple of modifications. We have a bunch of other things to do here, and you'll see how simple these are. And I know Bill yesterday told me I needed to speed up through this part, so we're going to move quickly to show you guys how you can do that here. So the next page I want to go to is the home page. What I like to do is often create a custom banner for that home page. So I am just going to go ahead and upload that file. I have a little banner here that someone on my team made. We'll say OK. And the other part I like to do is specify a specific group that holds the featured content. So that ribbon that you see across the home page on a portal, that's just a group. And then we can share that share content to the group that we want to be available. And so we'll say our featured content here. We'll save it. And we'll hop to our home page one more time. And now you guys will see I have my banner here, and now I have these featured content items across this ribbon. And now I'm making that a bit more of a destination for our users. So just a couple of seconds there, right? We totally changed the UI and took it from totally out of the box to be a little bit more branded for our purposes. Last thing I want to highlight here for you guys is the utility services. This is something that's very key to get set. Of course, the UI elements are important, but obviously without the utility services being set, we're not going to have a fully functional portal necessarily. So by default, we're reaching out to some of the ArcGIS Online services for things like geometry. But you'll see these other services are empty. So we can reach out to ArcGIS Online for them, or we could populate with our own services. I'll show you how we can populate with a geocoding service here. So here's a REST endpoint for an MGRS geocoding service. I'm going to go ahead and add that. And we'll just choose to add a geocoder. And we'll give it a name, and we'll say, yeah, we can do both place finding and batch geocoding with that. And now when I hit save, if my users were come to the map viewer, they could now search for MGRS coordinates in there. So do a quick save, and the last piece here we'll show you is configuring how to reach out to the ArcGIS Online resources. So with ArcGIS Online, all we need to do is just check those resources that we want to utilize, and then pass it credentials for an ArcGIS Online account. And then once we do that, we say configure, and it'll authenticate with ArcGIS Online. And then if we look at our utility services, you can now see that all those things are populated and available for my users. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to some more advanced configuration, but as I continue on through these slides here and get from the basic and into the advanced, just want to let everybody know, please, if you have any questions as we're going along, please feel free to throw those at us, okay, so we can take them in place, and we'll do our best to manage time. So speeding up here a little bit, advanced configuration, getting beyond some of those simple changes. How many of you are familiar with the config.js file of Portal? All right, so just a smattering of hands there, that's good. So for those of you that aren't familiar with that, this is a file that gets laid down during the install. And it provides some additional configuration of the portal for ArcGIS UI. Lots of reasons to configure this. It's often done in disconnected environments, but also just gives you an opportunity to sort of match the behavior requirements that you have. Definitely a big flag here for a warning perspective. This is a JavaScript file, so use caution when you're editing it if you're not entirely certain of how to do that. So make a backup. And another word of caution here is changes that are made to this file are not maintained during an upgrade. So before you do any upgrades, be sure to back that up and save that so you can update it after the upgrade process. So what can we do here? Here's just a few things. There's a great level of detail in the help documentation on how to do this, but a couple of those that might be of interest. Setting the extent service. So if you go to an item details page and you want to set the extent of an item. So when people are searching spatially, you can set a custom extent service to be maybe to the geography of your agency. Adding security classification banners. So if you wanted to have ribbon at the top and bottom that said something like for official use only, you could do that. Footer links at the bottom of your page on who to contact or help resources. And then you'll see a lot of different enabling and disabling options for creating accounts or even can your portal search ArcGIS Online? That was something that was new at 10.5. If you're in a disconnected environment, being able to search ArcGIS Online is not going to be very helpful to you, so you just want to take that option off the UI. So those are some things we can do there. Before we do a quick demo of that, another item to introduce you to, if you haven't been there, is the portal admin page. The portal admin page is something that you should definitely become very familiar with. If you're administering a portal, there's a lot of important operations that happen there. As we talk about the configuration elements, the couple of key things I like to highlight are one, the languages that are available in your portal, supported in your portal. You can disable certain languages, so if you know your user base is English only, you could turn off all the other languages, and that'll help with some of the search results that come back. Also, places here you can disable the automatic account creation if you're using web tier authentication, and even disable the sign-up options if you're using built-in authentication. Beyond the configuration elements, there's some other admin things that happen here that are very important to know. This is where you will import SSL certs. Bill's going to talk about that a little bit later, but this is where that happens. Web context URLs, if you're using a reverse proxy, you get access to your portal logs here. Licenses for premium apps are imported here. And then any backups of your sites and restorations of that happen here from the portal admin page. So it's definitely something to become very familiar with. All right, so let's do a quick advanced config demo here. In this portal that we're working on today, I have an Amazon instance here. And we're going to go ahead and make some changes to our config file. So here's the directory that it's stored in on a Windows instance. It's under the install. And I'm just going to crack it open with Notepad++ very quickly. And what you'll see here is a whole set of options here where you can change your trues to false. Yeah, I don't know how we do the... Yeah, we'll change that in just a sec. Yeah, so a little difficult to see in the back there, my apologies. But the ability there to turn on and off the sign up, show our security classification banners and things like that. What I've done in the interest of time here, as you can imagine, is I've got one all teed up and ready to go. And we're just going to rename this guy. And what happens here when you make changes to the config.js, it will require a portal restart here. So we're going to show you these changes where I've disabled the show sign up button. I've added a classification banner here that will end up at the top and the bottom. And then finally down at the bottom here, I've added some footer links at the bottom of my page, which will allow people to access help links and contact us. If anyone wants to get to that, they can email Bill for those things. So that's what will happen here. So for these changes to take effect, as I said, we've got to restart our portal service. This is always a frightful moment for any solution engineer as we take our portal down and try to bring it back up live and in living color, but we're going to give it a go. So while that's going down, what I want to do is take a quick tour of a portal admin site here, just another site to show you some of the things I mentioned in those bullets there. So here at the portal admin site, if we come into the system properties, the first thing I wanted to show you was the languages and the ability to turn those on or off. So here are all the various supported languages in here. And if I ever want, I can choose to update this and then just toggle all those on and off. And then as we have those search results and we get those core items that come with your portal, only those that are in the language that you've enabled will return. So it helps with some of those searching results. A word of caution, this is also something that will restart the portal. So don't do it in the middle of the day when you have people accessing your portal because it'll go down for a minute. So a couple other system settings in here that we talked about. If we look at our properties, here's where we can set that web context URL if we're working with the reverse proxy. And this is also where we set those options for disabling the sign up. So there's a great deal of things that happen in here, but from a configuration standpoint, just those couple are the ones we're gonna talk about for the moment. All right, Bill, what do you think? We ready to roll here with our restart of this? I'm gonna clear my cache real quick, and we'll reload this page, and if we're in good shape, we will see some classification banners here and some footer links.
How's it going?
No guts, no glory, right? There we go. Oh, you have a little faith over there, Bill. So now you can see that we have the banner there, the unclassified banner, which I've added in mine there at the top and the bottom. And then also, if we scroll down here a little bit, pull this up so it's not just totally in the middle of the page, you'll see I've added these links down here at the bottom of the page. Let's zoom in on that so we can see a bit. Okay, so down here at the bottom of the page, we now have link off to the Esri homepage, the portal for ArcGIS help, and then the contact us link so people can hit up Bill for their challenges and wants. And then the final thing I did through that config.js was you'll note that I disabled the sign up button here, so now no one else can gain access to this and create an account in my portal without my intervention as a portal admin there. All right. Anybody questions on that one yet? No, everybody's got it? All right, we'll pick it up then. Let me just log in here. Okay, cool. All right, so moving along. Next thing we wanted to talk about here for a bit is deploying some apps against Portal. There are currently some apps that are only supported against Portal, Insights being one of those. So we wanted to make sure we focused on talking about that and how we deploy that, as well as some others that have been there for a little bit that may be of interest to you. So Insights, new app that's been around since 10.5. It's an app for exploratory analysis. Has a paradigm of workbook pages and cards, and it's really great for users to kind of get in, dig into their data a bit, and create those workbooks that look like that. So as a portal admin, what do you need to do to enable that? Well, as I mentioned, it requires 10.5, and there's an installer for it, and this is deployed on both your portal and your hosting server. So if you have a single stack with your portal and your hosting server on one machine, which may very well be possible, you just run the installation once. If you have those elements distributed with portal on one machine and hosting server on another, you run that installer on both of those machines. Okay, so that's something we like to point out, because if you're moving through it quickly, it can be a little confusing, but just know it needs to be installed in both of those places. From there, this is where we're going to get back to the portal admin site. We're going to configure our portal with an Insights license. That's a named user license file. We read that in, and then at which point we can use the portal UI to disseminate licenses to our users here. So through the admin, we give it the license files, and then the named users we want to provision those to happen from the portal UI. Okay, a couple other apps that are out there if you want to use them against your portal. ArcGIS Maps for Office, being able to enable maps and things like that in your spreadsheets, as well as in PowerPoint. If you want to utilize that against your portal, you need to deploy something that's called the Portal Resources for ArcGIS Maps for Office. Okay, this is something that just hosts a set of JavaScript files that gets laid down against your portal. And then at which point, as soon as you've done that, users have the client-side application. They can utilize ArcGIS Maps for Office against your portal. But you have to have those supporting files there and installed. A couple other ones. Operations Dashboard. You're probably all very familiar with this by now, but this is an application. It's kind of a common operating picture type of app. It's really good for real-time data. If you want to deploy it against your portal and you're in a hybrid environment, there's nothing you have to do. There's an item that's there and available, and you can reach out and download that app from the internet. However, if you're in a disconnected setting, you actually have to run what we call the Operations Dashboard deployment utility. And in that case, it's just an installer that extracts the file and will make it available to be downloaded from your portal. Okay, so the steps for that are there and available, but be aware that if you're in a disconnected environment, this is something you have to do, but for those of you in a hybrid environment, there's a little less work involved. Last app we'll talk about, and then we'll actually look at how to do this with Insights, is for ArcGIS Pro. If you would like to use the authorization of ArcGIS Pro from your portal, we need to do a little bit of work to make that happen. The provisioning process is very much identical to what it is in ArcGIS Online, but the back-end experience to set that up is a little bit different. So that is with Pro against Portal. We actually have the license server is a part of that, and from it we will generate a named user license file, and then just like Insights, that named user license file is imported into our portal admin, and then we provision those licenses similar to how we would with Insights or even ArcGIS Pro if we were using it with ArcGIS Online. Okay, so let's see if we can do a deployment here. Let's do a demo. We're going to deploy the licenses for Insights. I currently, in my setup, I have Insights deployed against my portal and my hosting server. So that's all I've done is just run the installer. And now we're going to work through the authorization process. Okay, so here we are. We're in our portal that we've been working against today. You'll notice that there's no option here to manage licenses because we need to import that portal license file. So we're going to hop over to our portal admin. And we are going to choose the system and then licenses. And you'll see here what that'll report initially is those named users that we have already in our portal. So you can see I have 200 level 1 users, 100 level 2. But now I'm going to add some of those premium apps that are there and licenses for that. So I'll say import entitlements. And we're going to choose the type of app. So you see some of the different types of apps there. So in our case, it's Insights. And we're going to browse out to an Insights license file. So I have 50 licenses that are available to me. And we'll go ahead and import those. And so that completed successfully. And if I come back to my portal here, I refresh this page, I should now have the ability to manage licenses. So by bringing that in, that exposed this capability in the portal UI. And now I simply choose who I want to provide those licenses to. So I'm going to dole one out to myself, of course. I am not going to give Bill one. He's not authorized for that. And then the way we access it is here in the portal homepage. There's this apps launcher. And now the Insights is there and available for me to use. So it's really pretty simple from a portal admin perspective on how to deploy it. And that's the process for walking through that. All right, so we're going to keep on moving on. We're going to continue sort of getting a little bit deeper. We're going to pass it to Bill, who's going to talk some about SSL certs and trusts.
All right, thank you, Craig. Let's see. Okay, SSL certificates and trust. How many people have had SSL issues or run into any SSLs? Wow. Are those issues or are there just things that you had to put in place? Both, okay. Well, with if you're aware with the ArcGIS platform, there's starting to be more and more different components, and we'll talk about the complexity of this here a little bit in a moment. So most organizations these days, in the spirit of encryption and protection of your environments, most organizations have strict SSL requirements. If you're not aware, anytime you install Portal for ArcGIS or even ArcGIS Server, for example, the web services that are running, the REST endpoints that are running a part of those software out of the box or in ports 7443 or 6443, for example, they're actually running by default with what we call a self-signed certificate. So in order to have a HTTPS connection running, some type of certificate has to be there. So when we do the software installs out of the box, if you don't change anything, it creates a self-signed certificate. Typically, you don't want users directly interacting with these endpoints using a self-signed certificate. So what is one way to overcome that? Well, the first way to overcome that is bring into play the web adapter. And of course, with Portal for ArcGIS, you have to have the web adapter. So typically what you see customers or such as yourselves doing is you have a web server, you deploy the web adapters, you could deploy multiple on one machine or whatever your configuration is. And then on the web server itself, you have a properly signed SSL certificate, either from something like VeriSign or GoDaddy or a lot of the public internet ones out there, or maybe you have certificate authorities within your environments that need to sign a server certificate, and then you place that on the web server. And then for all of your customers, that's the endpoint to which they're accessing ArcGIS Server or Portal. So you have proper trust between your client web browser, a user sitting at their desk, and talking to the web server. So you sort of take out of play the fact that ArcGIS Server and Portal have self-signed certificates, because no users should be interacting with those ports directly. Some organizations even take it a step further. They're like, you know what, not only don't want users accessing self-signed certificate ports anywhere, I don't want self-signed certificates running anywhere in my environment. So a lot of folks have security teams that are all the time scanning servers. They're identifying, you got ports running here that's using a self-signed certificate. You need to fix this or I'm going to shut you down kind of scenario. So how do you overcome that? Well, fortunately, through the portal admin, and I'll just throw in there the ArcGIS server admin endpoints as well, we provide ways to replace these self-signed certificates with properly signed certificates. So when I talk about a properly signed certificate here in the context of a server certificate, I'm specifically talking about a certificate that is a private public key pairing, right? So there's a private key and a public key paired together. That's what we call a server certificate. In this case, you can either initiate a private key signing from the portal admin API, or if you already have a properly signed server certificate existing, then you can import that directly into the portal admin. Okay, so the portal admin allows for you to get your SSL certificates in there. But there's a whole lot more to this story, right? That's just replacing the certificate that's being used to talk on 7443. But let's look at a very simple WebGIS deployment. You know, instead of all being on one machine, maybe you have 2 or 3 machines. So as you can see here, there's a web server. There's portal for ArcGIS. You have an ArcGIS server. Maybe you're doing some type of web tier authentication with IWA, or maybe even something sophisticated with like LDAP or PKI, where it's talking to a secure LDAP. Maybe you're consuming services from other agencies. All of these components here have SSL touch points that you need to be aware of and potentially put in place the certain trust chains to make sure everything talks correctly. So for example, from a client to the web server, there has to be proper trust between the server certificate that the web server presents to the client, and the client has to have that trust chain in place to say, hey, the server gave me a certificate, it says it was signed by GoDaddy, do I trust GoDaddy, and if so, okay, I'm going to establish proper trust. Between the web server and portal, if portal is using a certificate, is there proper trust there? Between portal and ArcGIS server, if you get into the situation where you're replacing the self-signed certificates with server certificates, you also have to make sure your trust chains are in place. And also when you get into working with map services from other external organizations that may be signed from a variety of other certificate authorities out there, you may have to trust those certificate authorities within your environment as well. So the point of the story here, probably back to the point why many of you raised your hand, is there are a lot of SSL touch points these days within our environment, and it takes a little bit of time and configuration to make sure everything is set up right and talks correctly. So how do you go about establishing trust to other servers? Well, the portal admin, within the same place, also allows you to import root and intermediate certificates. So there's a certificate authority root. They may have intermediate authorities that then are actually the ones that sign your server SSL certificates. So you can import root or intermediate certificates through the API and as well the server certificate, what I talked about a while ago. Now, quick troubleshooting tidbit. When you import a root or intermediate, and I know I'm kind of way down the weeds on SSL at the moment. Hopefully some of what I'm talking about here is familiar to some of you. When you import a root or intermediate, really what that is the public key from that trust chain, okay? That's all that is what we call the public key. You can import it, and then that establishes trust. One thing I warn you from doing is you can edit the SSL certificate that's being used to serve, like right now it's pointing to a SSL certificate called portal. And portal is here in the list, and that's the default one. Don't ever import a root or intermediate certificate and then try to change this SSL certificate here to use a root or intermediate. Your portal will not come back up, okay? So don't do that. Only ever change the web server SSL certificate to be an alias when you import a server certificate. A server certificate, as I mentioned before, is a private and public key pairing, and that's a requirement for the SSL certificate setting there. So I just throw that out there. Maybe you jot it down, a word of caution, in the future. So real quick, just to show you what this may look like. So I have a virtual machine here that I've been, which is different from the one that Craig has been showing. ArcGIS Enterprise, very vanilla install. I've not done any of the nice fancy stuff that Craig has done. So I'm going to jump to portal admin just for a moment. And let's log in here. And if you've never, I got to spell things right. Let's make this a little bit bigger. If you've never been to this section before, there is a security section and there is a SSL certificate section. So in here, this is a very default portal section. So this is where you can import root and intermediate certificates. So if I just want to import a root or intermediate, you can just go choose a file, and I have one on my desktop already. Just an internal Esri one that we use, and I'll just call it Esri. Import it, and sure enough, I import it. All right. So like I said, that's, it's very easy, and sometimes you may have to import a number of certificates here.
Bill, does anything happen to my portal when I import that root certificate?
Absolutely, Craig. That's a great question. When you do this, unfortunately, portal has to restart. So when you import a root or intermediate, if I just happen to refresh this right now, oh, it still worked. So at some point within the next several seconds, actually portal will restart itself anytime you import a root or intermediate. So just be aware of that, okay? It may not happen instantaneously, but at some point it will say, you know what, I'm deciding I'm going to restart, and sure enough, portal has balanced itself at this point, or at least the internal web service that's running, okay? So that's normal. Don't freak out if you happen to do this yourself and all of a sudden you think your portal is down. It will come back in a couple minutes.
Question, yeah. Question was, will that be part of the ArcGIS monitor tool?
Whether the server is up or down? Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some basic configuration there now that will check if your servers are up and down. Yeah, absolutely. Let me see. Does this come back? Let's give it a second. Let's see how quickly this comes back. I'm just going to relay one more thing to you right here. Come on, portal. Just to follow through on that for a moment, if you go to System, Machines, just so you know, there's also a health check in portal now. Not sure if anyone knew that. I think this was maybe at 10.4, maybe it was at 10.5. So there's also a health check now. So through other IT ways, if you want to set up something that just ping your portal on occasion, hey, are you up, then there is a health check now within portal that you can hit. And I'm fairly certain that ArcGIS Monitor will incorporate this into their check. Okay, let's move on in the spirit of time. I know I've probably drilled more SSL into you than what you want to hear today. All right, so let's move on to talking about distributed collaborations. So distributed collaborations is a new capability that came about at 10.5. And initially at 10.5, a collaboration could be established between two ArcGIS Enterprise implementations. It was not initially available from ArcGIS Enterprise portal, for example, to online. However, at 10.5 release of ArcGIS Enterprise, as well as the ArcGIS Online release that occurred a few weeks ago before the UC, you now have the ability to establish a collaboration between your ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online. And of course, collaboration, if you've ever seen anything about it, it's how you can do group-based sharing of information between two organizations, whether they're two Portal for ArcGIS implementations or Portal with Online. Of course, it replicates anything, a number of different items within a group. For example, it's Web Maps and Web Scenes. They're directly copied from one organization to another. When it comes to URLs, or specifically hosted feature services, at 10.5, they were only copied by reference. So only the URL to a hosted feature service was copied from one portal to another. At 10.5, you can actually replicate the actual data for a hosted feature service between ArcGIS Portal or ArcGIS Enterprise to ArcGIS Online. So it's a physically copying, or you have the option of copying the data during the replication process. And also, when you set up a collaboration, you choose when the synchronization occurs. It can either happen immediately, or you can set it up to happen on a scheduled interval. Yes, sir? So great question. Does they have to be the same version or can they be different versions? And I believe the answer is they have to be the same version.
Yeah, 10.5 and 10.5.1 will work, but whatever capability has been released at 10.5.1 will not be available in that mixed version. It'll be only the 10.5 capability. And so you have to be above 10.5 though.
So the first step is you have to set up a collaboration. A collaboration is always initiated by what we call a host. Okay? You as portal administrators set up and establish collaborations. A regular user or a publisher cannot create a collaboration. Only a portal administrator can do this. Okay? So you initiate a collaboration from a host organization, and then one or more guest organizations, portals, can be invited to join that collaboration. Again, on those guest organizations, only portal administrators can actually do this. Okay, so this is the responsibility of someone like yourselves. And then what happens is, once you establish a host and a guest, invitations are sent from the host to the guest to join the collaboration. And this is a very secure file format to ensure that it's not tampered with or anything like that. All right. So as part of a collaboration, there has to be a specific trust established between the host and the guest. All right. And this is where the exchange of an invitation and response comes into play. So if you create a collaboration, you say, hey, guest, use this file to join me. And then what happens is the guest says, okay, I got your file. I'm going to import it. Here is a very secure file response. And then you import that response back into the host organization. And then because of that transfer, then you have a well-established trust that can occur between those two organizations. So here's a nice little diagram of what that may look like. Let's say, for example, on the left-hand side is your host. Let's say that's ArcGIS Online. Maybe within your environment you have ArcGIS Enterprise installed, and that's going to act as a guest. So the first step is the host administrator creates a collaboration and invites a guest. The invitation is downloaded and is sent to the guest admin. All right, so there's a file. Now this doesn't automatically happen behind the scenes. You have to download this file and then get it to the guest person, whether it's you send the file to them via email or a hard drive or a thumb drive or something. All right, so you have to get that file to the portal administrator. Now watch this. You ready? You like that, right? That's by far the extent of my PowerPoint expertise right there.
Don't let.
And
him
I didn't
fool
even
you.
create the slide.
That.
All right, so that file gets over there to the guest. They import the file. The guest portal now says, oh, okay, I'm going to accept this invitation. I want to become part of this collaboration. So because of that import invitation, I'm going to generate a response, and I'm going to get it back. You ready? Yeah. All right. Once the host admin imports that response or accepts it, now we have a very proper trust established between these two portals. I like that. The crowd was into that one. All right, so now we have a trust established. So the next step in setting up a collaboration is establishing a workspace of sharing, of sharing information. So a collaboration can actually contain one or more workspaces. Okay? A workspace is sort of this conceptual space where collaborated content is collected and then shared with the participating organizations. And really the way to think about this is a workspace is assigned a group. So there's a one-to-one relationship between a workspace and the items in a group. Okay? So you can have multiple workspaces participating in a collaboration. Okay? When you set up a workspace and assign a group to it, you also have to define the access at which the direction that items will be replicated. Okay? So there's three things that you can choose from. So you can either decide that information will be sent in one direction. So for example, maybe from the host to the guest. It can be designated to go in the other direction from the guest to the host, or you can also set it up so that content can be sent two ways between the guest and the host. So you have the choice to set up the type of direction of sharing of information in the collaboration, or in the workspace in this case.
Bill, we got a question over here.
Yes?
You talked about the two-way data share. What about conflict?
What about conflicts? Yeah, that's a great question. So I believe the way it works, and unfortunately, we're not the real collaboration experts up here. So if you have items in two groups, and what happens is, if I share a new item here, then it'll get moved over to this item here. Now, if I were to happen to edit this item over here, the item has now become updated. So that item, the way I understand it, should actually now get replicated back to the host because there's been a change to that item. Now, when you talk about conflicts, if it couldn't do that because of some conflict, I apologize, I'm not exactly sure how that's handled. But if you talk to us after we're done here, maybe we can get some information so we can follow up with you specifically to answer that question. Did I go over this one? No, I did not. So not only, I got a collaboration set up, I define a workspace, I define the direction of sharing. You also can specify when the data gets synchronized. So by default, the default setting is immediately, so as soon as you share an item to a group for the first time that's in a workspace, that item would then get collaborated and replicated over to your other portal. But you can also change it to schedule it at intervals such as maybe you only want to do it once a day or every 6 hours or something like that. So you have flexibility to determine when it gets synchronized. So these are just a couple perhaps deployment pattern slides. There's many different scenarios that you can think of here. But let's say I have a host organization, let's say this is ArcGIS Online, and I've created a collaboration and I've invited 3 different guests to my collaboration. So the way this kind of works is on the host I have a group set up that's participating in a particular workspace, and then on each of the guest portals I have a workspace also established with the group. So what happens is anytime an item is added or updated at the host, that item will get replicated into the collaboration and then pushed out to the other 3 guest portals. So think of it as a way that item can be pushed down to many different portals, for example. On the other flip side, maybe you want to go in the other way. Maybe you want to have many different portals, or maybe the ArcGIS Enterprise implementations, and these are all doing something within a collaboration workspace, and then they all get pushed up into a single repository within ArcGIS Online, for example. So you have flexibility to decide how the type of collaboration that you want to set up to meet your particular needs. All right, now Craig's going to walk through this. It won't be as good as my PowerPoint little thing moving back and forth. No, seriously, he's going to do a good job here. So we're going to basically take you through these steps as a portal admin of how to go through, set up this collaboration and workspace if you've never seen it, to better understand it. 3?
Let's do it. All right, guys, so we're going to go through this, and the way we're going to do it today is we're actually going to talk to you about the ArcGIS Enterprise to portal collaboration. Since that's new at 10.5.1, we thought we'd show that. So what I have right now is this is an ArcGIS Online organization, and this is going to be the host in our collaboration. So I'm going to come into my organization settings, some of these things we looked at before, and I'm going to go ahead and set up a collaboration here. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is create that collaboration in the host. So in my fictional scenario here, we're going to talk, that, hey, a state is going to collaborate with a national government, and so we want to pass that information up here. So we give this a full description, but we'll say for now that, hey, this is a collaboration. If I can spell it. Okay, so we set that collaboration, and now we are going to set the workspace within that collaboration. So the notion here of these workspaces, we could have many workspaces within a collaboration. So maybe we're having a workspace for a different theme or a different department or something of that nature. So in our case, we're going to call this Basemaps from the state. All right, and this is a workspace. Right? Okay. Now we need to provide a group. There's a one-to-one relationship between a workspace and a group, so we can create those here, or if we had a pre-existing one, we could set that up. And again, I'm going to call this Basemaps from state. Okay. Say next. Now, this is where we can begin to specify the information about our collaboration. You know, do we want to do copies with that? And we'll say yes. And now we're going to start that invitation process. So we're going to say save and invite. And so what it's going to ask us for here is what's the URL to our guest portal. So our guest portal in this case is going to be the one we've been working on all afternoon here. So we're going to copy the URL to it and we'll paste it here. And so in this collaboration, our guest organization is going to send content to our host. So our portal is going to send information to ArcGIS Online. And now we're going to save that invitation, and that's a file that's been downloaded locally here on my machine. So the next step is we'll go over to our guest portal. We're going to get into its settings and come down to collaborations. And in this case, we're going to say we're going to accept an invitation. And we're going to browse out to that file that's been saved there on disk. Right, our invite file here. And we're going to accept the invitation. So we can go ahead and save that response because that's the response we're going to pass back to our host. However, before we do that, we're going to go ahead and come back to that. Let's get a little twisted here. We're going to join a workspace on our guest as well. So much like we had a group on our host to be with a workspace, we have a group on our guest here. So we'll call this Basemaps to the state. And we'll give that a tag. Okay. And in this case, again, we're going to say we're going to do copies. And here's the initial settings for when we would do that. But just so you're aware, by default, it always is set to sync immediately. So this is something you can change at any time, but by default, it's set to sync immediately. So we'll say to join that workspace. And we're all set there. And now we need to come back to our host. And we need to go ahead and accept our guest organization's response so we can establish trust. All right, so we're completing that nice little PowerPoint slide that Bill had here once we accept this response. So we can say open and accept. And at this point, we have a collaboration now completely configured from the portal admin perspective between our ArcGIS Online organization, which is our host, and our guest portal. Does that make sense? There's a lot of moving parts in that initial setup, we know, but now what happens is users save content to those groups. They will be sent from our portal up to our ArcGIS Online organization. Do we have enough time to give it a go, Bill?
That's up to you.
All right. All right, we'll do one quick option here. We didn't do this yesterday. We were running a little short on time, but no guts, no glory. It's our last day of tech workshop. So we're going to save a quick web map here. And we'll call this the imagery base map. And we're going to save it. And we're going to share it with our Basemaps to state group. And since our collaboration is set to sync immediately, if we come back to our host organization and our groups, and we go ahead and sort this. Here's our Basemaps from state. Can you give me a little drum roll, Bill? I'm definitely pretty nervous at the moment. And we check our content. This is it. All right, so this is what happens in these moments. You have a predefined group. We're going to do a quick share to a previously established collaboration there that sets content to national, and then that imagery base map. We'll come over here and we'll show you that one. So close here, which I know is working. So there's that imagery base map was pushed right up there. So that's the collaboration. The big part there is the how to configure it, and it figures as we take a risk there in the moment. It didn't really work out, but that was definitely Bill's fault. So.
No
Put
way.
that on his review.
All right, well, thank you, Craig. Let's move on. We're an hour into this now. We only have 15 minutes, so we're going to need to blow through a few more pieces of information here to make sure we got time to answer some questions here. How many people are running Portal with integrated web authentication today with IIS, single sign-on? Okay, a few of you. How many people want to know how to set that up so you have a single sign-on experience? All right, that's great. Many more people here want to know how to do that. All right, so we actually have very good help doc on this. But I'm going to quickly show you how to get it done. It's actually quite simple. IT administrators may have done this for you or something and may have seemed like a lot of magic, but I'm going to show you, everyone here today, if you want to do it yourself. So this is just a conceptual diagram of what it looks like. Basically, at the web server, you're authenticating users' credentials against Active Directory or LDAP. If authenticated, then your user passes through to Portal. And what Portal will do, especially for new users, hey, it says someone has been authenticated. Let me check against Active Directory to get their email, their user, their full name, and some pieces of information to automatically create a new user account. So I'm just going to quickly show you what that looks like. Actually quite simple. There's two pieces you have to do. So right now I'm logged into Portal. I'm going to sign out. This is just built in, out of the box a Portal here. So the first step is you need to enable Windows authentication on the Portal web adapter. Okay? So there is a front-end piece that you have to do. Pretty straightforward. You come to Portal, the authentication pieces. You're going to disable anonymous and enable Windows authentication. So the web server is now going to force users to authenticate against Active Directory at the web tier. Okay, so that's step one. All right, we can get rid of that. The next thing you have to do is you have to jump into Portal Admin and tell Portal that you want to achieve this single sign-on experience by automatically creating accounts for a user and also setting up the ability for it to talk to Active Directory. So real quick, I'm going to do log in with super secret password here. So if we go to security, config, there's two settings that you need to make a change here. One is by default, enable automatic account creation is false. So for a true single sign-on experience, we want to set that to true so that when new users come in, they automatically have an account created. Here you can also change like what account new users automatically are assigned or what role, as well as are new users given a level 1 or level 2 access. So I'm going to update that to true. The other thing I'm going to do is, real quick, like I have something already pre-configured here, there's a simple JSON that you configure to update the identity store that Portal uses. So by default, it's using built-in. I'm going to paste this little JSON here, and this JSON is very well documented in our help of what that needs to be. Essentially, hey, I need to read Active Directory with some account. It needs to have a password, and then I'm going to get like the email and display name of users as they come in. So I'm going to update that configuration. All right. So that's actually all that's required to actually set up integrated Windows authentication with Portal. So if I come back over here now and I go through my web adapter at this point, which should be Windows authenticated, as you can see, it automatically logged me in. And if I go to my organization, here's the Bill Major account that it just created for me, and it's passed through my Active Directory credentials. So now I have this very nice single sign-on experience. So that's actually all, it's pretty straightforward. implementation to set up IWA like this. So I just thought that would be useful. It's a pretty simple task and has a lot of benefit. All right, so we're on the home stretch now. All right, so just a few final slides of, as portal administrator, some things that have come along in 10.5 that you need to be aware of to do your job. So one thing to be aware of at 10.5 is now we have the concept of level 1 and level 2 named users. And you have the ability to manage these users as well as roles through the UI. So you get to decide which users are level 1, level 2, as well as the default role for new members as they come in. Prior to 10.5, there was a little X logo there that if, oh man, I'm struggling right now. I fell apart on that.
Need to pick it up.
For your federated servers, there was a little X there that you could unfederate your ArcGIS server from your portal. The problem with that little X being there is, you might have clicked on it, not really sure what it's going to do. Maybe it was accidental or not intentional. And what happened was when you unfederate a server, if it was accidental, there was actually a lot of things that went bad from there. So we actually have removed that X little thing there from the server federation so that you can no longer accidentally unfederate a server from this UI. So if you want to unfederate an ArcGIS server, you have to specifically go into Portal Administrator to do that. We still provide you the means to do it, but we want to deliberately make sure that, this is what I want to do. I'm coming here for that very purpose to get the job done. Craig already touched on this a little bit from the Insights perspective, but through Portal Admin, this is where you import licenses for many different apps, such as App Studio, Drone to Map, Insights, of course, and you import the various license files there through Portal Admin, and then within the UI, you provision out those licenses to users within your environment. And then once you provision these apps to certain users, they then have access to those through the app launcher on the UI. Living Atlas of the World, Craig mentioned this as well. It's a lot of great content out there that Esri makes available these days. A lot of rich content for doing a lot of enrichment. And really, there's two types of Living Atlas content today. There's everything that is hosted in ArcGIS Online, a lot of great items. Those items are actually registered in a portal in your ArcGIS Enterprise portal installation. There are references to the URLs. So you'll see that those links to those items in a installed portal. This content is read-only. But there's also local content that you can download from Esri as well if you want to house some boundary data within your portal for ArcGIS. And this data is available, like I said, from Esri, and we provide the tools to get this properly published to your portal. And through the UI, by default, accessing Living Atlas content is checked on. Probably what you always also want to do is go ahead and check on subscriber content. You have to provide a username and password, but no credits are burned with subscriber content. A lot of great content there, I believe, things like the NAPE and some of the other services that you've seen publicized. And then there's also premium Living Atlas content that does require credits, and if you decide to check that on, then users will be able to have access to that Living Atlas content from ArcGIS Online, but through your portal implementation. Now, if you're in a disconnected environment, you probably want to uncheck that Access Living Atlas in your portal because it's not going to be able to get to ArcGIS Online anyway. And what that will also do is remove all of those items from your portal, at least being able to show up in search results and things like that. And this is where the downloading of the local boundary files and publishing it to your portal comes into play. It would be very useful in disconnected environments. Yes, sir.
Can you apportion one subscriber a certain amount of credits that they can use, and when they hit that, then you're cutting them off?
Yeah, so it's interesting here. When you set up Living Atlas content this way here, you have to provide a username and password. All Living Atlas content accessed through your portal by all of your users are going through that one user account. So you can assign a credit limitation, restriction, to that user, and once it hits that, then sort of like everything stops happening because all of the credits have been burned for that user. Does that make sense?
You should be able to backtrack and find out who the culprit is that you might have to talk to.
Sure. I mean, there are ways to log information about the environment of kind of who did what. Sure. Give a little plug for the ArcGIS API for Python. New Python to really be able to manage your web GIS. You as port administrators, a lot of times you're doing repetitive tasks, and you may want to use things like the Python API to help streamline some of those workflows for your purposes. All right, so that kind of wraps up. How are we doing on time, Craig? Did we get pretty close?
Yeah,
we got 5 minutes
left. Yep.
You know, we're kind of end of the day here, so a lot of these sessions here might be bypassed now in terms of other things. Like I said, we always ask you to fill out your survey. Please remember, good feedback for me, poor feedback, make sure you reference Craig's name. But hopefully there'll be no poor feedback here today. So we'll spend a few minutes answering some questions. So what you got? No questions.
No
wow.
questions?
Well, that means we did a perfect job.
Is it happy hour? What we having here?
One question. Here we go. We got this guy.
So when you were doing the collaboration earlier, there was an option to either, I think it was like share data all the time or reference the data. Reference to me is like it keeps its location.
So specifically in this case, I think the reference or copy maybe is what you were talking about.
Yeah.
So that's actually very specific to a hosted feature service. So data that you take a zipped shapefile, you upload it, and it converts it into a hosted feature service. So in that case, the question is, when you have a collaboration and it's synchronized, does that item just get copied, but the URL is still pointing back over here to the source, or do you want to physically take the data behind the hosted feature service and move it over here and establish a new hosted feature service? So that's the difference between copy and reference in that case.
Yeah, and just keep in mind that the copy is only available with the ArcGIS Online as a host at this time.
Right.
So later on, that'll be an option when you're going to 2 ArcGIS Enterprise portals, but right now just for ArcGIS Online.
All other items like the web maps and all that, they're all copied
Yeah.
back and forth. Yeah.
Yep.
Later on, being 10.6.
That's the plan for the roadmap right now.
How about the performance with the reference? Have you seen any performance issues when you're referencing the process?
No, I mean that really comes down to network limitations between the two organization environments.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You talked about the 2 different environments, hybrid versus disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And ArcGIS Online is not FedRAMP approved for the agency I work for.
Okay.
So we had to shut down ArcGIS Online, but we want to be able to use the Basemaps. So how does that work? I mean, do you have to have an ArcGIS Online account set up in order to run the hybrid?
I don't know, John. Can you answer that question? Yeah. So, John, I know John has gone through some FedRAMP. Yeah. And also, just to give a little plug here, Esri also sells a commercial data appliance with all the base maps. So if it's something that you want to purchase to get all those base maps on premises, you also have that option. Yeah.
Yeah, so I also would kind of say dig into a little bit more because I think the FedRAMP also has to do about the storage of your own content. I mean, there's much more to it, but I think you could consume those services from ArcGIS Online and not have to worry about. I believe that would be true. Yeah, yeah, definitely double check me. Yeah, question. Say that for me one more time. No, it's not specific.
Right, yeah,
right.
part
It's
of
the
that.
content within those groups. So there's groups themselves are not passed back and forth. It's just the content within them.
Now, I would say you could automate that a little bit, like with the Python API. You could say, hey, connect to my ArcGIS Online or give me all the groups, and then create the same group names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, in that case, it's the host always initiates a collaboration. So depending on the send-receive scenario set up, once the collaboration is in place, then it's sort of, both of them are kind of functioning in the same way. So at that, once you get past the establishing the trust, that you make a good point. They're kind of functioning, they're both the same at this point in terms of which way the direction is working.
It is just an important distinction, though. The host is the only one that can delete the collaboration. A guest could leave it, but the host is really in full control of that collaboration.
Also, I'll just make the note at 10.5.1, ArcGIS Online can only function as a host. Right. ArcGIS Online cannot be a guest. So that is one that is one limitation right now. Is ArcGIS Online always has to initiate a collaboration. It cannot be the receiver, cannot function as a guest.
Anybody
Anything
else?
All right. Well, thank you for coming.
Everyone.
Who's going to the party?